a matter of just capturing the information that's already publicly available and moving on from there. Sorry, I need to make sure that we're recording, and I had managed to not do that. So Yahoo found a whole lot of, Yahoo found 58 email addresses and 48 different hosts. So just for fun, I'll just do this one last time, and then we'll move on. But if I were to do vt.edu, let's just see what comes up. Taking longer than I expected. All right, well, I'm not going to belabor the point too long, so we'll let that cook, and we'll kind of move on. And if it decides to come back with something, then we'll do this. We'll take a look at what it comes back with later. But in any case, so that's kind of Harvester and that's Harvester and Hunter.io. So Breach-Parse is a different type of tool. Breach-Parse, oh, here we go. So here's our vt.edu. So vt.edu has quite a few results back. So just for fun, so you know, if you guys want to start spamming VT, there you go. There's all your results. So, all right. So moving on. So Breach-Parse is also pretty cool. Breach-Parse is more used for offline scanning, or it's just a conglomeration of these parsing databases. And so I was going to try to install it, but I found out that it was like 50 gig of breach data, and so then it allows you to be able to parse it. So I chose not to do that. So that was kind of where I was on that one. I just didn't think we had time to kind of go through every single tool, but it is one that's maybe worth looking at. So I did include the links to all of these, or additional information to all of these in the presentation, and we will make the presentation available. But Hunter.io, again, domain search list. It works best if you actually have a login. I just use my my liberty.edu because I don't know, it's not one that I use a lot. So I just use that one to create the login. It's a free account, and then allows me to be able to get more information, and the results are exportable in a CSV format. Harvester, again, gathers emails, subdomains, does a lot more than what Hunter.io does, but it does require that you have Kali. Or I guess you could just put it on a Linux box, but it works best when you just have some other tools that you can pivot around with. But it does do all kinds of cool searches like you saw. And again, we can even run it against Shodan. If you find a particular host that you want to kind of bang against and want to know more about, you can actually run that against Shodan, which is kind of cool. And then, like I said, Breach-Parse is a custom-built offline breach tool, 50 gigabyte, and there is a video out there. I actually learned about this from a Udemy class that I thought was pretty cool, and the guy who actually built it was doing the Udemy class, and he actually walks through how to use it, and that particular part of that course is available on YouTube. So if you want to know more about Breach-Parse, I suggest that you check out the YouTube channel and check it out. But there's a listing of like the directories, 50 gig of them, and he has the capability of being able to parse. So if you put in, like, you know, your email address or your company email address or your company domain name, it can parse through all of that and be able to see if you're breached or not. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the recon situation looks like, and how, from an overview, what a recon situation would look like, and how people are getting these email addresses. And I know, particularly at Carillion, we always think about, well, we get a spam email or a particular email that comes in, and it's always kind of targeted toward one particular subset, or maybe you're always looking at it, looking from the lens of how did they get it, what is it that they're looking to leverage once they do once somebody were to respond to an email, because it's not always just about clicking a link and dropping malware. It could be trying to capture other information about the organization so that they can leverage that to do something different. So we're always trying to figure out, well, what's the end game for sending the list to these many people, and then where did they get that information, and what can we do about protecting those folks and protecting that data and protecting their email addresses. So it's an educational thing, because particularly in my environment where the doctors like to be able to share that information because they want to be part of different types of organizations and try to get additional information, sometimes they don't realize that they're also putting themselves at risk by putting that information out there. So it's a little bit of give and take, but the long story short is that this is how they are able to leverage that information to gain access to your systems. So moving on, so brute force. So now we have the user's information, but what do we do with it? So one of the things that we can do is we can do credential stuffing, and we'll talk about that. So it's leveraging stolen credentials against various websites, and then password spraying, which I don't know if everybody understands what these are or anything, but we'll kind of go over those, just give a high-level overview of what these do. And then we'll talk about Hydra and what it can do. So credential stuffing is basically, it's a typical brute force password attack, and it largely depends on password reuse. So if you're out there and you reuse your password, so you use the same password for multiple sites, then you are a candidate for credential stuffing. And so on a small scale, this kind of graphic kind of plays it out, that you have some information out there that's leaked. So you go to Sears.com or whatever, and your password is exposed, your username and password is exposed. So what they'll do is that they'll get that information, and then they'll say, okay, well, what other sites do I think maybe this person might go to? Well, they might go to jcpenney.com. So I'm going to try that username and that password on this other site. And so that's credential stuffing. I'm using the same username, same password for the same on multiple sites, trying to see if you're using the same password on multiple sites, so see if you're a candidate for credential stuffing. So that's credential stuffing. And one other thing is that on a large scale, when you have lots of these, a lot of times you'll see bots used for automation. So you may have several user accounts being exposed or being tried at once on different sites. So just from a purely money making or just a credential stealing type of standpoint. Password spraying is a little different, and this is more fun, I think, just in my mind, because it's hard. Number one, it's harder to detect, because we are always, from a blue team standpoint, we're always on guard for watching out for the one user account that's getting hammered on 15 times or whatever, right? We even put in password locks. Like if somebody tries to lock the password tries the password more than 5 times, we lock the account. Well, password spraying is a little different. And how this works is that we're leveraging weak or poorly created passwords. And so in this particular graphic, I think it displays it pretty well. I go to the harvester and I get all those email addresses. I guarantee you one of those people probably has a password of summer 2020, because it fits the criteria, it fits the complexity criteria that's out there by Windows, right? It needs to be 8 characters, or maybe it's 10 characters, whatever. And so, but it's easily remembered, and so I'm going to create a password of summer 2020. Or in this particular case, summer 2016. So the attacker knows that. So what he's going to do is he's going to say, okay, well, if all of these, and I look using Harvester or Hunter.io, I see that all the usernames are similar in how they're constructed. So I'm going to lop off the Carillion.com or CarillionsClinic.org, and I'm going to spray 2020, summer 2020, to all of those accounts. But I'm going to do it slowly. So I'm not going to show that it's just this one IP address that's hitting all of these accounts and just trying to spray. I'm going to go, I've got all the time in the world. So I'm going to hit one account every 5 minutes with this password. And if it takes me, if it takes me a day in order to be able to get what I want, then I'm okay with that, because eventually somebody's going to hit, and when they do, then I know that I've got something to work with. Now I've got an account that I can actually escalate and begin to use to maneuver around the environment. So that's password spraying. And again, depending on the automation and the scale, you may see some bots used for this, particularly for larger criminal syndicates and things like that. So it all depends on how they're doing it. So sometimes you may even see where the password sprays are coming from various IPs, even though it's the same attacker. Because they're using bots, they can make it look as if it's coming from different IPs. So that's kind of how that would work. So let's talk about Hydra. So Hydra is a cool little Kali tool. And again, I was going to do it, but I just felt like we probably wouldn't have time. So, but it's something that's worth checking out. And again, I put a link here at the root slide. And it's an online password cracking tool that allows you to be able to do exactly what we talked about. You can do credential stuffing or credential spraying, password guessing. And what it does is that this basic context, basically what I'm doing here in this particular example, if this were one entire string, what you would see is that I'm attacking the root password with a Unix_passwords.txt file. And I'm basically sending that password text file over. I'm walking through that password text file, right? And it's going to try root through all these passwords at this particular SSH address. So the interesting thing is that I can also go the reverse, right? I can go try all these usernames with just this one password, or I can do both. I can do a lot of different things. So Hydra is really cool for that. And so if you want to try to check it out and see what it's all about, I encourage you to do so. Just remember anything that I tell you about, I guess I have to tell you that, do it on your own systems, don't do it on public systems, things like that. But kind of something pretty cool to tinker around with. If you can build an environment like I did with AWS, you can build your environment and then kind of have at it, see what you can do. So finishing up the brute force, so this is really what it's all about, account escalation. So the perpetrator gets a local administrator account, maybe drops Mimikatz on that particular box waiting for somebody to do something. So then maybe this guy, he's a server admin, so he uses the server admin rights because he needs to get on a server. So now he's on, so now I can pivot up to the server account. Well, now I'm on a server. Some other server admin needs to use his DA account for some reason. So now I can pop up to DA. And now it's game over, and I hope they do a better job of managing my domain than I did, because they now own the domain. So once that happens, now we can do all kinds of cool things. So one of those things is that now we can capture the entire ntds.dit file out of the domain controllers. And so let's talk about that. So now let's go into password cracking. So this will be another live demo, and so fingers crossed everything goes well. But what we're going to cover is shadow copies, secretstump.py, hashcat, and John the Ripper, maybe. And then we're going to move into some more tools such as auditing and protection. So I'm going to move over here and try to get into our Windows/Kali environment. So what we're going to do is that we're going to capture, and again, somebody send me a heads up or whatever if you can't see what I'm seeing. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and grab the shadow file from this domain controller. So this is my domain controller, and this is what you would do whether you're doing your own personal auditing of domain accounts. So if you wanted to do this yourself, you certainly can. And I'll include all the links and everything on how to do this. But basically what we want to do is that we want to launch a command shell. And we're going to grab the shadow. We're going to create some shadows, or just create one shadow. So the very first thing I like to do before I get started, particularly if it's in a production environment, I like to make sure that there are no shadows existing. So in this particular case, there's not. I knew there wasn't. But so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the shadow file. And again, if somebody else has a better idea how this works, or a better idea, this is not the end-all be-all. This is just a way to do this. So now I've created my shadow file, and you'll see it says shadow copy 2. So what I'm going to do now is that I need to change my, actually that is right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture, well, I was hoping I could expand that out. So hopefully you guys can see that okay. So now what I'm going to do is from that shadow file I just created, I'm going to grab the ntds.dit file. And if you're not familiar with the ntds.dit, that is essentially the entire structure of your passwords, and that's what all your passwords are kept in on a domain. So I'm going to grab a copy of that. I'm also going to grab a copy of the system registry directory or registry file. And I'm also, just for fun, I'm going to grab the SAM file. So now I've copied all those to the root of C. So let me just make sure that those are actually there. And there's my ntds.dit, my SAM, and my system. So now what I want to do is I'm going to cover my tracks. I'm going to go ahead and delete those, or excuse me, delete the shadow file that I created. So now nobody's the wiser. I wasn't even there. And so when I list out the shadows, again, there's nothing there. So I'm done with the domain controller at this point. I've got everything I need to begin my offline password cracking. So now what I want to do is, now that I have those files, I'm going to create a new little directory here. And I'm going to call them ntds. Okay? I'm going to grab all these guys. And I'm going to pop them right here into this file here. And now I'm going to get rid of these. So the long story short here is that basically what I'm trying to do is I need to get this over to my Kali box. So how you do that, there's a myriad of ways, but in this particular case, I'm using Mobaterm. So what I'm going to do is I got this little directory here called Rise1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab those files. And I'm going to drop them right into there. Boom, boom, boom. So now I've got all those guys where I want them. So now they're all at home, Kali, Rise 1. Okay? So now what I want to do is I'm going to use something called secrets.py, and this is part of the Impackets collection, so if you will. So I need to get to that Python directory. And it's under the examples directory. And here's a listing of all of the Python scripts that comes with Impacket. So there's a lot of things cool. There's a lot of cool things in here, but the one that we're really most interested in is the secrets one. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to run this secrets, and what this is going to do, it's going to jam out the entire ntds.dit compared against the system, and then give me a comparison of hashes. It's going to basically give me all the hashes of my entire domain. Fortunately, I only have like 9 people in my domain on this test box. In the real world, you're probably more realistically, depending on the size of your organization, you could have thousands of accounts. So while it'll run pretty quickly here, obviously in a larger organization, it's not going to run this fast. It's going to take some time. So it helps if you grab the entire string. So now what we're doing is that we're basically hashing out the entire strings, or all the strings for my domain. So now we're done. So now, if I go here, I have this new hash.ntds.dev. If I open this up, we'll see that we have all of the hashes for all of the users. So we've got Johnny B. Good, Ed Summers, Nate Seitz, Eric York, Jared Register, Rob Garbee, Frank Beans, Ted Toaster, Betty Blender, and Carol Carrot. So all of their information there. So now what I want to do is I'm going to run Hashcat. So Hashcat is another password cracking tool similar to John the Ripper, and basically it allows us to be able to run, to be able to take these hashes, and now I'm going to use basically two things. I'm going to use a rule to do leak speak, trying to take not just a password list, but then take that password list and then be able to use things like change the O to a 0, or change the 3 to or change the E to a 3, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of different rules that are included in Hashcat, and I'll talk about those in a minute because they do matter how you run those. But I have created, or excuse me, I haven't created, I have downloaded one called One Rule to Rule Them All. And this particular rule is awesome because it works really, really well. It takes all the different rules, combines them together, and it typically captures or gets most of the passwords that I'm looking for. And remember, from my standpoint as an administrator, I'm looking for the low-hanging fruit. I'm not looking to pop every password in my domain. That would be ridiculous. What I'm looking for are just the passwords that are the weakest link. What are the ones that I'm looking for? The winter 2020, the summer 2019, the autumn, or maybe they've Carillion 1, something like that. So those are the ones that I'm looking for. So we'll go ahead and run this. And then what it'll do. Now, if we check the status on this, we're going to see that it's going to take, where is it at? 7 hours. So we're not going to wait for 7 hours, okay? But this is a free box that I've got just stood up in the AWS cloud. It's very limited on memory. It's very limited on processors. So I have my own Kelly box here at work. And so what I've done is that I've taken this and I've already, it's kind of like when you're watching one of those cooking shows when they say, hey, it takes 30 minutes, but yet I've already got one prepared. So fortunately for you, I've already got one prepared. So I'm going to get rid of these hashes real quick. Going to get rid of that. And I've got the pre-processed hashes that I'm going to grab and put them here. And as it would figure, perfect. That's exactly what I did not want to happen. Okay. So long story short, didn't work out the way I wanted to, but that's okay because I've already pre-hashed them. So what we would have done is that we would have run the second run against those, and that would have basically pulled everything together and gave us the cat file, which is this here. And the results file, which is here. So now, I'm not sure why that didn't work, but in any case, so now we've got all the hashes, we've got the usernames, we've got the hashes, we've got the passwords. So now what I want to do is I'm going to move away from this, and we'll talk about some other tools. So, and we can take a look at John the Ripper, maybe if we have time, but I don't want to waste too much time, or I don't want not waste time, but I don't want to take up too much time. So basically what we've done is that we walked through the shadow files, the secrets files, and the hashcat. And had I allowed that to run for 7 hours, what you would have seen is that you would have gotten everything that you needed, run the second hashcat file, which basically pulls everything together, and now then you have your list of your users and your passwords plus their hashes. And now you can do some really cool stuff with that. Now you can go back through and say, okay, well, how many users have their passwords? If you put that into an Excel file, because it's parsable, you can put it into an Excel file, and then you can say, well, how many users are 6 characters? How many people have Carillion in their name? How many people have Hokey in their name, or whatever? So you kind of figure out what's the most easily guessable one. So, talking about hashcat, syntax does matter. And what I mean by that is that the syntax, there's a lot of syntax in hashcat. So when you're walking through hashcat, make sure you're looking at maybe some tutorials or looking at the help files, the man pages, to try to understand what it is, because it'll hack or it'll crack just about any kind of password file you can throw at it. MD5, it'll even crack Word files, like the passwords on Word files and stuff. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty powerful tool. So watch your syntax. I know that I battled with that for quite some time, trying to get the syntax correct. So it's a learning process, but once you get it, it's pretty cool. Now, let's talk about the rules. So the rules matter. When I ran, so there's some embedded rules that are already there, and then you can download some rules from GitHub. So some of the ones that are already there, the best 64 rule. So I ran just those particular, the domain that I created was 12 accounts that I have. I ran that, and it took about 2 seconds with the best 64 rule, running it on my box. With the leak speak rule, it took like 1 second. With the one rule to rule them all rule, it took 20 minutes. So what was going to take 7 hours took 20 minutes on my box. And the reason why that is because it's multi-threaded. So be careful, because if that box is doing anything else, it's getting ready to get hammered when you run hashcat. And I've included a screen capture here of my box, and what you're seeing there is that's 8 cores all getting crushed by hashcat running this particular program. So just be careful when you're running it. Like it's a Kali box, and so nobody else obviously is using my Kali box. But if you're running it on some other box that you're dependent on, it's going to crush it pretty quickly. And it will use every processor it has available to it. So the more processors you can throw at it, the less time it'll take. So just a word of caution there. But that's
Robert.
hashcat. Yeah.
Just real quick. Also, if you're doing any of this real CPU intensive stuff, and you have an AWS account, you don't want to do this on an account that you have production stuff tied to. A lot of those free tier T2 type VMs, EC2 instances use a leaky bucket CPU credit model, and as soon as the leaky bucket runs out, then it throttles that VM down to 10%, and your entire account has a max of 750 hours per year of CPU credits. So you can cripple yourself if you do it haphazardly. I'll just say.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, it is definitely something to be careful with when you're chunking out passwords like this. So But if you're just getting started with doing password cracking, I suggest John the Ripper or Johnny. Johnny is kind of fun. It's where I got started with my password cracking. Did not know a lot about how to do it. I've heard a lot about John the Ripper. So Johnny is the GUI interface to John the Ripper. The limitations to John the Ripper or Johnny is that it is single-threaded. So it does have something where you can, it has something where you can try to make it multi-threaded. I tried that, and the results, results may vary, but it didn't do anything that I really expected it to do. I think it tries to process it differently, but I wasn't real happy with the results. So that's when I moved over to Hashcat. But Johnny is cool, and it allows you to be able to learn basically how the whole thing pulls together. You use the options and the settings, and it kind of builds out the Johnny context or syntax for you, and then you can see what it's trying to do under the covers, and then that kind of gives you the tools that you need to be able to kind of start doing it yourself, which then will begin to allow you to be able to kind of leverage that kind of mentality into Hashcat. And then I'm sure there's a bajillion others that you can use. But if you're just starting out, you just want to try to play around a little bit, I suggest Johnny or John the Ripper. Just keep in mind that your password list, if you're going to be feeding it a password list, that it does have to be in a .lst in order for it to recognize it. Don't know why, but for Johnny, that's just the way it works. And it performs well enough for a standard audit. I mean, it was what we used for a long time until I just got tired of it. I just started to move over to something a little bit more robust. So it works okay. It's not horrible. It's slower, but it's not. I mean, it does the job. So I was very happy with it until I found Hashcat. I've been kind of a Hashcat fan since. So that covers the password cracking piece. So let's talk about password auditing. So this is the cool stuff. So this is what the meat and potatoes of this whole presentation is really what I wanted to get to more than anything. Was my friends at Black Hill Security. I call them my friends. They don't know me from anybody, but I'm a big fan of Black Hill Security. I'm a big fan of John Strand. And if you've never seen him give a presentation, you are doing yourself a disservice. You need to go watch that guy. He's fantastic. So, but there's a couple of tools that his company has produced, and one of them is called DPAT. And DPAT is a really, really cool tool. And I'll show you why. So let's go back over here. And what DPAT does, I'm not going to bother with trying to run the tool, but basically you take what you've already popped, right? You take your cat file and your hashes, and you take everything that you've already done, and you point it back to DPAT. And the executable would be, it's a Python script that you run, and you basically give it the hash file and the cat file that you used, basically all the hashes, and it creates these really cool reports. And the reports look like this. So this is your report. So I've only got like 13 accounts. But imagine if I had 50 or 100 accounts, right? It's going to go ahead and allow me to be able to see all those accounts. So now I know that I've got one user that he has a 12-character password length, but yet I could still pop the password. Anybody want to guess why I was able to pop that password, even though it looks really complex? Anybody? Okay. It's a keyboard walk. Basically, if you look at that particular password, it's 1QAZ, then hold the shift key, 2WSX, and then undo the shift key, and it's a 3EDC. So, so that's the reason why I was able to pop that password, even though it was a 12-character password. So that may be somebody I want to go talk to and say, hey, look, great try, 12 characters, love it, but maybe we need to try again. The other one that I might be interested in is the Winter 2020. Winter 2020 is used by 2 different people, and so maybe I need to go talk to those folks and say, hey, look, I appreciate you trying to do what you need to do here, but we need to do better. Or maybe you've got a company name like for instance Carillion and Carillion exclamation point fits all the complexity criteria. But if I know that I'm from an outside attacker, I know that that's probably going to be something I want to password spray because that's an easily guessable password. Or maybe maybe you use welcome one as like, people are onboarding, and even though the password is set to change password at next login, that's still going to come up as maybe somebody that we need to come up with a better way of being able to assign new user accounts because everybody gets the welcome one. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. So these guys down here, particularly mine, did not get popped. But so these are a little bit more complex. However, what I might find is that maybe I've got, even though I didn't pop that password, maybe it's the same password being used. Maybe it's the same password being used across the board. So maybe I've got a really good password, but it's being used 20 times. So I can look at unique passwords. I can say password length, top password, password reuse. So now I can say, okay, well, this hash is being used 3 times. This hash is being used twice. But maybe I assigned the same password to every computer, or maybe every, I've got these systems and every one of them has the same password. It's a great password, but now I know, but now that you've got 500 systems that are using the same password. Even though I wasn't able to pop the password, I'd still be able to see that. So just some kind of cool stuff that you can do with that. So I really like this tool. I think it's really cool how you can be able to get into it, be able to see some information that you normally wouldn't be able to see without having to really dig in deep. And this kind of gives you this information right off the bat and kind of allows you to be able to see where maybe you can focus your efforts. And maybe maybe we need to focus in on the people that are only creating 6-character passwords or whatever. So just something to think about. All right, so that's that. And again, it's multi-reports are available, and it does help from an auditing perspective of what you can do to help maybe better educate your user population. Now, the other one that's really cool is the CredDefense Toolkit. So the CredDefense Toolkit is one that you use. So Black Hill Security does all these audits for different people, obviously, and they keep seeing the same things happen, right? They have poor passwords, Kerber roasting, MBNS or responder spoofing, password sprays, all these things. And so what they said was there's got to be something that we can do for our population, for the general population as a general rule, for us to be able to help out the entire community. So they created this cool tool called CredDefense. So CredDefense, you run it, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. You have to run it as an administrator, okay? And it does some really cool things. But right off the bat, what it does is password auditing. So rather than going through the ntds.dit, rather than going through all of that, this will do it all for you. Now, it will not be as robust because you can't necessarily run the rules and you can't run the different types of things that you can run, say, with Hashcat or even with Johnny. But if you're looking for instant low-hanging fruit, this will help. And you install it on your domain controller and you give it the password file. So basically, it's looking for a password list, a rainbow table, if you will. So you give it, so I've got one that's pretty big, and then you tell it, where do you want the results of this run? And you run it on any domain controller, and you run the audit. And there's my results. So now I open this up. Now here's my results instantly. And it made it so much easier, right? I didn't have to get the ntds.dit file. I didn't have to do that. So what am I seeing here? So I've got 2 accounts out here that have a password never expires set. I got guest and administrator. All of these accounts can be delegated. All of these admin accounts can be delegated. I've got this one that's password not required. This account has no password, so guest and guest, obviously. Now these users here all are using the same hash. It tells me that straight off the bat. These users are using the same hash for that one. And then it only popped one password, welcome1, and it tells me that Tom Toaster, Betty Blender, and Carol Carrot all have the same password of welcome1. Then it tells us that we've got 11 unique files. One was cracked. 3 DAs were cracked. So it's just kind of just some instant information. And so this would be a great tool if you just want to just do an instant, like, where do I stand from a security standpoint with my users and their passwords. So great. That alone is worth the price of admission. But it gets even better. So we know that the complexity requirements that Windows has is pretty nominal, right? Pretty weak, right? You got to have at least, so you can set the length, but it's got to have one character or one special character, one number, uppercase. You know the thing. But it doesn't do anything in way of like actual words. Well, this you install is, so again, you would have to install this on your domain controllers now, not just one, but all of them, so that it comes across. And you have a password list. And it's going to work, I promise. Of course. So normally what you would see is that this would come up and it would have autumn, summer, winter. Oh, great. Okay, so apparently it pulled in my other password list. Great. So this is the password list that I have right now. So this was a mistake. I should have never had this many words in here, because I actually tried to do this as a fun thing just to see what it would take, and it took everything. But the problem is now when I try to change my password, it doesn't allow me to change it to anything. But so what we would normally want is something more like this. So what we've got here is we got summer, spring, winter, fall, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So you get a 2017, 2018, 2019. It goes all the way to 22, and then password. And then you could do something like, company name, Radford, if people are using Radford in their domain or in their password, those kinds of things. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to say save and deploy changes. So now what that does is that now that's going to squirt out to all of the other domain controllers that you have this installed on. So now when somebody tries to create that password with autumn 2020, it's going to say, doesn't meet the complexity requirements, try again. So it's going to force your users not to use silly passwords like winter, summer, autumn, fall, those kinds of things. And it's fully editable, so you can add in whatever passwords that you don't want them to use. So that, again, worth the price of admission. And then let's talk about responders. So responder, without going into a lot of detail, let's suppose that somebody's typing in a username, or excuse me, typing in a file path, whack server name whack share, and they get the server name wrong. It's supposed to be whack server 1. Instead, they left out the E, so it's sever 1. Well, responder will come out and say a responder attack was, because what will happen, NT by default, or excuse me, Windows by default will go, hey, is sever 1 out there anywhere? And responder will go back and say, yep, that's me. And so instantly what will try to happen is that Windows will send that responder the credentials for that particular share. So it's going to try to attach to that share using credentials, and the responder captures the credentials. So what this particular thing does is that it's a responder guard. So what it does is that it's looking for those type of activities in your event logs that will correlate to say, hey, look, looks like you've got a responder issue going on. you might want to take a look at that. So it's going to start logging those types of events in your event logs. And then beyond that, then we're going to start doing event monitoring and coalescing those particular event logs so that you know exactly what to look for. So now we can take a look, and this basically turns on the event monitoring and starts logging the proper things so that you can actually go in and start looking at your logs, looking for particular things, and that's what those modules are going to do for you. So without going into a lot of detail, you could give it a CIDR block. And so let's say, for instance, I could give it the CIDR, and I guess I should show you what's in here. It just basically says this particular network. And then it's just going to say desktop CIDR. So you can feed it however many CIDR blocks you want and logging. And it also does a honeypot. So it'll actually let you know as a honeypot. You can actually deploy it as a honeypot. So it'll actually let you know, hey, look, it wasn't an active attack. Somebody is actively trying to use responder against you. And then we can actually start it. And then it's going to run this PowerShell script, and then it'll just run in the background all the time. And it'll just keep rolling. And that just runs as a scheduled task. So again, nothing really fancy. And none of these are really particularly fancy the way that they do them. And I've included a link in the presentation, but that's kind of where we go with that. So that is CredDefense. So another particularly cool tool. And I really didn't do it justice, but I do encourage you they've got some cool videos and some different types of papers on both these tools, and I suggest that for free you can't beat it, right? So it's worth taking a look at. All right, so again, DPAT, developed by Black Hill Security, generates multiple reports, does require cracked hashes like from Hashcat or John the Ripper, and can generate sanitized versions. That's one thing I didn't mention, is that it can generate sanitized versions, so you can hand these right up to management without the usernames and without the passwords, or excuse me, with the usernames without the passwords, so that you can go, okay, well, this particular user was popped, but it doesn't actually give you if you were to send that report out, it wouldn't actually show their passwords. CredDefense, one-stop shop for mitigation. Must have access to the domain controller and must run with admin rights. But again, really cool tool. All right, so finishing up here, prevention and protection. So one of the ways that we want to try to prevent, particularly from outside attacking, is multi-factor authentication. And I think everybody's probably somewhat familiar with multi-factor authentication. I know that I did a presentation 2 months ago on that, and we had some good stuff come out. But YubiKeys were a big thing that came out of that. So and hopefully we're going to be able to get Doug Anderson to do a presentation on YubiKeys at some point. But MFA is definitely one. Have I been pwned? I was going to go there, but we're running out of time, so I'm not going to try to go there. That's another great site. Basically, if you click the link, you can put in your email address. You can find out if you've been if somebody has breached your information. There is a paid version for that, so that's also really cool. So that's something you might want to check out. And then lastly, Security Onion. Security Onion is like really cool. Security Onion is like the best free tool outside of Kali that you can get, and it's an open source network monitoring tool. If you've not done anything with Security Onion and you just want to get your hands dirty and get involved with IDS, then this is the way to go. You can stand it up in from just a USB key in a live format, or you can actually install it and actually have it do real stuff. It's really awesome, but they've even improved it from when I was using it. It's in fact we're thinking about standing a small subset up here. It's really cool, and it allows you to be able to do some IDS detection. It has OSSEC on it. It's got for everything that Kali does from a penetration testing, Security Onion does from a blue team perspective, and it's really cool. And I can't really talk about it too much. So it's just something that you really should be looking at if you're trying to do IDS and network scanning, and particularly because it's free and it's got everything you need in it, and it does scale well for large enterprises between the way that you can do small boxes that send metadata up to the larger, to the head units and things like that. So something pretty cool to look at from a protection standpoint. So, but that kind of does it in 6:32. So I tried to hold it as close to an hour as I could. And again, free resources. Want to throw that out there again. So check out the free resources for some other stuff if you guys are interested. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Anybody have any thoughts or ideas? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was great. I don't think there was anything I would disagree with or say differently.
Oh, well, that's encouraging. Thank you. Hopefully next month. I know Tweaks had to jump off. Either next month or September, Tweaks is going to be doing a presentation, and I think it's going to be somewhat interactive. I don't want to steal his thunder, but so that should be pretty cool. I know that the cyber range will probably be involved, so that's something to look forward to. The other thing that we've got is we're also got Ken Nevers on the hook to talk about an exploit that he found himself, and so I want to try to dig into that a little bit. Got some other things kind of lined up, so I think we're going to be pretty good for presentations. So the drought that had occurred there for a little while, particularly because of COVID, and we had to kind of really start rethinking things. I think we're through that now, so we're back on top, and you're going to start seeing some more things happening. So, in any case, but that kind of does it for this evening. If anybody has any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out. Let us know. info@roanokeinfosec.com. Anything that you wanted to say, anything that you didn't get a chance to say, just let us know, and we'll kind of go from there. But I do appreciate everybody attending, and if nobody else has any questions, we'll go ahead and end tonight. But if somebody has something, feel free. I mean, this is normally where we would get together, drink beer, and have great conversations. But not this time. So, anybody got anything? All right. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was curious. Are you guys running Security Onion at Carillion?
We are not. We have a not yet, I should say. We have a small instance that we are looking at for kind of some test platforms that we're kind of tinkering with. I ran it at a previous organization, absolutely loved it, and then my counterpart Jared, and he went to a class, and they were talking about it, and he's like, "Hey, man, we ought to look at the security." And I'm like, "Yes, we absolutely should." So, so we are. I've used it in the past. I really liked it. I have not used it since they've added the elk stack. So I'm really anxious to dig into that and see what that does. So, but
okay.
The answer to the question is no, but I did.
Well, that's great news, because I don't know if you know, but the newest big revolution Security Onion's in beta right now, called Hybrid Hunter. So if you're starting new and fresh, that would be what to look into right now. It's got some really awesome improvements.
I will do that. Thank you. I appreciate that. So no, we have not started yet. We are just now looking at it. So if we've got something new, then by all means, that's where we'll go. So thank you. Appreciate that, Matt. Anybody else? All right. Well, again, thank you guys for attending, and we will see you guys next month. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Rob.